On the night of May 21st, 2010, Air India Express Flight 812 was supposed to be just another short-haul international flight. Scheduled to fly from Dubai to Mangalore, it was a part of a typical turnaround journey, departing India at 9:35 p.m., landing in Dubai, and then returning to Mangalore by early morning. The aircraft, a Boeing 737-800 equipped with short-field performance features, was well suited for landing at Mangalore's tabletop runway. The captain, 55-year-old Z Glusica, a Serbian national, had flown into Mangalore multiple times before. His co-pilot, Harbinder Singh Ahluwalia, was also experienced, but despite their credentials, things were not as smooth as they appeared. The captain had just returned from Serbia 2 days prior and was still dealing with jet lag. Worse, he wasn't even originally scheduled for this flight. It was a last-minute assignment. The silent threat of fatigue. Fatigue is one of aviation's silent killers. Pilots, like anyone else, are affected by circadian rhythms. This flight occurred during the circadian low, between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., a period when alertness naturally drops. Making matters worse, no medical checks were performed on the crew at Mangalore, as Air India Express lacked a contract medical officer at the airport. Instead, pilots had to self-certify their fitness to fly, a loophole that contributed to the disaster that was about to unfold. As the aircraft left Dubai for the 3.5-hour journey to India, the captain's fatigue began to show. Roughly an hour into the flight, he dozed off in the cockpit. His snoring filled the confined space while the first officer managed the aircraft alone, performing both flying and communication duties. A job meant for two, the dangerous runway ahead. Mangalore Airport isn't your average runway. Located atop a hill, it features a tabletop layout, a narrow strip surrounded by steep drops. The end of runway 24 overlooks a 250-foot cliff. The margin for error is practically non-existent. If a pilot lands too late or too fast, there's little room to recover. As if the topography wasn't challenging enough, on this night, the Mangalore radar system was down, forcing air traffic control, ATC, to rely on manual tracking. This method required planes to be spaced further apart and delayed descent permissions. That meant Flight 812 would start descending much later than usual, a problem that would soon become critical. A crucial briefing skipped. Pilots are trained to perform approach briefings before beginning descent, especially for challenging landings. For Mangalore, this should have occurred 150 miles from the airport, but with the captain asleep, that critical window passed by. When the first officer finally woke the captain, the plane was already beginning its descent. Groggy and disoriented, the captain never fully regained situational awareness. Yet he assumed command and tried to lose altitude quickly using speed brakes. Too little, too late. Their descent was steep, rushed, and dangerously unstable. By the time they were supposed to align with the runway using a DME arc approach, they were thousands of feet too high. The Phantom Glide slope. Here's where the descent went from risky to reckless. Normally, planes approach the runway on a 3-degree glide slope, a safe and gradual descent path. But somehow, Flight 812's instruments latched onto a false 9-degree glide slope, an extremely steep and dangerous path that isn't intended for landing. A well-rested, alert crew would have noticed this anomaly instantly, but this fatigued team completely missed the warning signs, both visually and from their instruments. They continued descending at this alarming angle, putting the aircraft on a collision course with disaster. Still too fast, still too high. At every point along their descent, they were far above the altitude they should have been at. At 10 nautical miles from the airport, they should have been at 2,000 feet. Instead, they were at 5,000 feet. At 4 miles out, they were still double the correct altitude. The first officer began showing signs of doubt. He hesitated when the captain asked for flaps 10, a configuration inappropriate for their speed. "Are you sure?" he asked. The captain insisted. The plane was descending at a frightening 4,000 feet per minute. Alarms in the cockpit were screaming, "Sync rate, pull up!" The aircraft's ground proximity warning system did everything it could to alert the crew, but the captain, likely trapped in plan continuation bias, ignored them. A final chance missed. As they approached the runway threshold, there was still a chance to avoid disaster. The aircraft crossed the runway at 200 feet above ground level at a speed of 160 knots, 16 knots above their target landing speed. The captain disengaged the autopilot and took full manual control. The first officer again urged him to go around, realizing they wouldn't have enough runway to stop, but he was not authorized to land, and so he didn't challenge the captain further. This moment, their last opportunity to abort the landing, was lost to hesitation and hierarchy. a fatal decision at the edge. As Air India Express Flight 812 approached the runway, it touched down 40,500 feet from the threshold, well past the ideal touchdown zone on the 8,000-foot tabletop strip. The aircraft bounced once, then settled again at 5,200 feet, leaving just 2,800 feet to bring a 737 to a halt. Less runway than comfort. In this critical moment, the auto brake was inexplicably set to level 2 instead of maximum, a setting better suited for casual landings, not impending catastrophe. Although reverse thrust was initially deployed, the captain, in a baffling move, canceled it and shoved the throttle forward to attempt a go-around, right when stopping was their only hope. It was a clear violation of procedure and physics alike. With neither the speed to take off nor the distance to stop, the aircraft essentially became a confused missile barreling toward the cliff. Caught between two bad choices with no runway left to choose either, the fall and the fire. What followed was pure devastation. The aircraft tore through the ILS antenna, ripped through the perimeter fence like paper, and launched over the edge of the 250-foot cliff. Gravity, which had patiently waited its turn, now took charge. The Boeing 737 plummeted into the gorge below, shattering on impact. The fuel tanks burst, flames erupted, and the once pristine aircraft was reduced to a burning wreck scattered across half a kilometer. The fuselage split into 3 massive chunks, as if the plane itself was trying to divide the trauma. Emergency responders struggled to reach the site through the treacherous terrain. Google Maps would have just shrugged and said, "You're on your own." But it was the local villagers who stepped in first, charging into the flames without training or tools, guided only by instinct and heart. In a scene of unimaginable horror, these everyday heroes pulled survivors from the wreckage. Out of 166 souls on board, only 8 lived to tell the tale, thanks in large part to the selfless bravery of people who didn't wait for help. They became it. Lessons carved in steel and fire. The investigation painted a picture of a tragedy that could have been avoided at multiple stages. Fatigue, poor scheduling, lack of medical checks, inadequate infrastructure, and ultimately, one captain's refusal to abort a dangerous approach. All of these contributed to the crash. Had the captain simply applied full brakes and sustained reverse thrust, the plane could have stopped within the overrun zone. Instead, his last-second attempt to take off sealed the aircraft's fate. Flight 812 is a chilling reminder of how a chain of small oversights can culminate in a disaster. It's also a cautionary tale about the dangers of hierarchical cockpit culture, pilot fatigue, and non-standard runway operations. Air India Express and the Indian Directorate General of Civil Aviation were heavily criticized for their role in systemic lapses. Recommendations were made to mandate better rest periods, enforce strict medical testing, and provide fatigue management training. But for the families of the 158 victims, those lessons came at a harrowing cost. If you found this video as gripping and eye-opening as we did, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us out. Got thoughts on the crash or what could have been done differently? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. For more deep dives into real aviation disasters and untold stories, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a flight with us. Thanks for flying with us today. See you in the next one.